If you Google food shortage statistics, you will find that the conversation about a worldwide food shortage has been engaged for some time. Other conversations about pesticides and genetically modified organisms rage on, potentially striking fear into the hearts of many. The time may be past for looking at the problems. Instead, we need to create solutions. This is a story about what people can accomplish together as a community. As scarcity of resources continues to be an issue, this story is a timely example of the power of synergy between local government, local organizations, and local hard-working, conscientious citizens.
Creating Landscapes for Families started 6.5 years ago. And it started when a group of families came to me and said, we would love to do what our children do in Creating Landscapes summer program at Allegheny College, to get together and celebrate art and music and movement. So we came together for 6 weeks, one night a week, and we really enjoyed one another. Got together, created music and dance and art, and got to know one another as people. Everyone there did it because they knew this was right for the kids to come together as families.
The bond of true community flourished in their group and attracted some surprising attention.
Halfway through the year, a local man, Bob Ackerman, and some of his friends came to us and said, we hear about this group of families getting together for the sake of their children, and we have an idea to do a community garden on my land, on Bob's land. So we listened, and the families all said, let's do it.
This community of people was used to taking action and getting results, but their motivation to say let's do it came from a deeper place.
We go to the grocery store, and the things that we want to buy our kids are not within our food stamp budget. Let's do it because we're tired of feeding our kids the chips that are 99 cents a bag and the pop that we can get 2 for $1 when we know they should be eating things that are better for them. So Bob Ackerman hosted us, and we grew our first community garden, and that was about 5 years ago.
This is when the real fun started, and the many lessons also.
We knew nothing. And so that's the best part. We read, we learned, we involved master gardeners. We spent the rest of that school year learning what we needed to learn about gardening. We learned how to take care of pests the best we could and critters that were up on that hill in a natural and organic way. We learned the nutritional value of all kinds of foods, what would be the most important for us to grow in a limited space. We learned the value of working together, growing and then sharing the product of our work among us. The kids got to run in wide open space because that hill was nothing but blue sky and a big wide open space. The kids learned to honor the land and the earth that we live on. They learned to walk between rows of tender plants.
Working together, putting their hands in the dirt together through 5 seasons caused some changes.
Go and plant a garden. Every fall we would harvest the garden. And what I noticed as director of the program and just the person who got to walk around and enjoy everything I saw was that families were becoming very confident in their own potential to grow. They weren't leaning as much on our wonderful Allegheny College collaborators and our wonderful Master Gardener collaborators. They were leaning on one another. They were reading more. They were coming with more ideas than they were asking for advice. They were coming to the planning table with knowledge and confidence.
The group grew more and more passionate about their garden as the years went by. Tuesdays and Thursdays were their windows for working at the Ackerman Forum. and oftentimes the weather prohibited them from doing what they loved. So the families had an idea.
They were coming to me and saying, we should have this garden right in our neighborhood. We should have a garden that we can walk out and pick tomatoes for dinner. And I said, yeah, you should. So I said, let's keep thinking about that. And one of our moms called me actually at home one night and said, there is a lot right on South Main Street that connects to Chula Court that most of us can walk to, and it's just sitting there vacant and has been that way for 5 years, and it's owned by the city.
The families of Creating Landscapes had an idea. Ms. Clausen, fueled by their sincerity, took action right away. Ultimately, this connected Creating Landscapes with the Meadville Redevelopment Authority.
Joyce had the idea, saw the piece of land, investigated enough to find out that the Redevelopment Authority was the legal owner. She sent an email to the mayor forwarded the email to me, and the rest has been history.
They had some hurdles to jump over, specifically a zoning ordinance. The news came that they wouldn't be permitted to use the property as a community garden.
Well, to start, Jill Withy from the Redevelopment Authority, they own the property involved, and she came to me and asked, said this is what we want to do there, and I basically had to tell her that it isn't permitted there, and the reason actually it goes back several years. In 2007, the city adopted a multi-municipal comprehensive plan with some of the outlying townships, and as part of that plan, we decided to do some land use sharing. So some of the uses that may not be as appropriate in the city, including large-scale agriculture, which is what typically you think of when we say an agricultural use. It just wouldn't work in the city. There's not space for that. And unfortunately, as part of that zoning out of agriculture, it included community gardens because we didn't differentiate between community gardens and agriculture. So basically, it wouldn't be permitted in the city under that land use sharing agreement. It wasn't intentional to zone out community gardens. It just wasn't a known factor around here at the time. At the same time that Jill came to me about this, the Planning Commission, which I'm liaison to, we're working on updating the zoning ordinance. And right around the same time, we started talking about community gardens and should it be something that we would permit. And came up with allowing community gardens as what's called a special exception, which allows that use to happen pursuant to some conditions. And we came up with about 10 conditions, but would allow them anywhere in the city as long as they met those conditions. And those mainly had to do with controlling refuse and runoff and making sure you're not going to have fertilizers going into the street, and you can't have animals there, chickens and bees, can't have those there. And when I say community garden or agriculture, I'm really talking about what's called a principal use. Under zoning, you have principal uses and you have accessory uses. So a principal use is really what is the main use of that property. So say at your house, the main use is residential. And so then maybe you have a backyard garden, and that would be an accessory use. And what that accessory use means is that it wouldn't be there if the house wasn't there. You wouldn't be having a backyard garden if your house wasn't there. So a community garden really is the principal use of a property, and that's why it wouldn't be permitted per se as a principal use. It would be considered agriculture, and that's why we wouldn't permit it.
The zoning hearing board functioned exactly the way that they're designed to function. I think a misconception is that they were incorrect in their decision, and really, based on the ordinances that we have in the city, they made exactly the right decision. So what really needed to happen was that a change needed to occur from the front end, if you will, through planning and zoning, and then on to city council. And Planning and Zoning Commission really is organized in order to provide recommendations to city council on what issues need to be brought before council and change our ordinances, adjusting our ordinances, things like that. I just know that the timing that these things usually take was not really conducive to the time schedule that the Creating Landscapes group was hoping could be followed in terms of trying to get plantings initiated for a 2014 growing season. So that kind of fast-tracked, if you will, I think at least the desire for us to hear what the community garden concept was and how it would all play out. I think that every group that comes to us with an issue that they would like to have addressed hopes that those wheels of government move very quickly to promote and cure and correct the issue that they have. The reality is that whatever issue that group has, there are other groups that have the exact opposite issue. So that's why we all have to be cautious and deliberate in our discussions about whatever the issue is. And above all, the one thing that I wanted to convey to the Creating Landscapes group in our discussions about Community Garden was that whatever City Council decided to move forward or not at the time would not be viewed as an indictment or an endorsement of Creating Landscapes for Families. We had to deal with the issue of the ordinances related to a community garden, irrespective of the group who wanted to start it. We had to be aware that if we do something and allow a community garden, or in our case, suspend, if you will, the part of our ordinance that doesn't allow them at this time, and use this time now to work toward making an exception to allow them officially in the future. By us doing that, we needed to be certain that any group who wanted to put a community garden in the city of Meadville would be falling under the exact same parameters. So while we may or may not like it for this one particular group, we had to be aware that what we did needed to be equally applied to anybody who came forward.
The process worked well for Creating Landscapes for Families. Meadville is set to have its first community garden. But now that the door has been opened, what might happen if we step through? What do you see the future for community gardens in Meadville? Do you see it just being this one thing, or do you see it blossoming into something else?
I would like to see this experiment work and be successful in the fact that we own about a dozen different lots scattered throughout the city. So if this project is successful for the involvement with the redevelopment authority, then that can trigger the reuse of some of these vacant lots. And frequently the vacant lots that we own, they're undersized for building purposes. They're in a location where a next door neighbor may not want to take on or be able to take on the care and maintenance of a piece of land. So I would like to expand the project with the redevelopment authority, and beyond that, there's other legal entities out there that have an interest in doing community gardens for a different purpose. So what this has done now is open the door for many venues of community gardens, not just this one in particular.
The 5 years we spent on Ackerman were our learning years. We needed those years. We needed that space to be loud, to ask questions, to have support. But then when the time came for the families to know we can do this on our own, we needed the chance to do it on our own. It took what it took. And when we got there, they knew it, and boy was I proud. Jill and I stood where the sidewalk meets the grass. And it was a moment, because I know that we both saw what could be on that dusty vacant lot. And Jill said, I'll do whatever it takes on my end. I said, I'll do whatever it takes on my end. And we knew we would get there. I love Jill Withy.
The zoning board's initial response was difficult for Ms. Clausen and the families of Creating Landscapes, but the process yielded fruit.
I just know how systems work, and that sometimes people have to say things that are just as hard for them to say as they are for us to hear. This was one of those times. I will tell you that I was sitting at a table, and there were 3 men, and then a solicitor, and then Gary Johnson. The man sitting directly across from me, he could not look me in the eye. He was that heartbroken, but they had to say no. It was part of the law. Gary Johnson, within a breath of it being denied, not even a breath, said, you can appeal. We meet every Tuesday and Thursday, so I had to tell them what happened. And it was in telling them that I realized it's up to us. someone has to make a step here. And why not us? Without that roadblock, I never would have had the conversations I had with children about our democracy, about how democracy works.
So the process has been overwhelmingly beneficial for the families especially.
Absolutely. So, oh my gosh, yes.
What do you think the garden will do for the community?
In town, a sense of pride. Gardens and handling the earth in general heal. So those who need to dig a little will have an opportunity to do that. Those who need to get out of their house on an evening to get some fresh air will be able to go to the garden. Kids will have healthy food on their tables. Parents will be able to go out and get a tomato to slice for dinner.
Do you foresee ever expanding the garden into other areas of the community?
Yeah, Jill Withy, on that first day when we met, and we had never met each other before, by the end of that car ride, I hopped in her vehicle with her, and we were driving to 5 other lots that are owned by the Redevelopment Authority and that she thought would be nice spots for gardens. So we want it to be beautiful and thriving. We don't want to spread ourselves too thin, but yes, we do see it growing. Not just us. We already have our eye on one little corner spot we'd like to make maybe just a bean for beans or melons, but for other community gardens. And we're hoping that other folks who are interested will come and talk to us because we can all learn from one another. And I, as the person who has had the honor of watching families go from knowing nothing to feeling they can do it on their own, I can't wait for the day when I can see our families giving advice to other families and taking them under their wing.
Sort of what community is all about.
Sort of, yes.